Our Thing, the birth of salsa in Nueva York, was made possible by the Mellon Foundation, which seeks to build just communities enriched by meaning and empowered by critical thinking, where ideas and imagination can thrive. Heads up, this episode contains some explicit language.
Futuro.
The plane was like 8 hours late because James Brown wouldn't leave without his equipment on.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It was 1974 on a runway in New York City. Fania co-owner Jerry Masucci, along with sound engineer Bernie Fox, boarded a very, very, very heavy plane.
James Brown insists that his equipment goes on the same plane as the musicians. Completely overloaded, and there's 57,000 pounds of equipment, and it ain't gonna fit on this 707.
This plane had some of the biggest musicians at the time on board.
The entire black music industry. I mean, it was like everybody except for Stevie Wonder was there.
James Brown and Sister Sledge and UMass Aquila, I think, and B.B. King, lots of people.
All these cats were headed to play at a concert thousands of miles away in Central Africa. The flight would be long and tiring, but everyone was more nervous about the plane being able to even lift off at all.
Willie came over to me and said, I got bad vibes, I'm leaving.
That's Alex Masucci, brother of Fania co-founder Jerry Masucci. And the passenger with bad vibes Alex mentions is legendary Fania artist Willie Colon.
And I said, Willie, you can't leave, Willie. He said, no, man, I'm serious. I got bad vibes and I'm leaving. And he left. I had bad vibes, too.
Bad vibes because this plane was now overloaded with equipment and passengers.
I figured, well, I'm not going to, if my brother dies, I'm going to feel bad if I didn't go.
Alex, plus the remaining members of the Fania All Stars and all the other musicians reluctantly got on the plane.
And then we had to stand in the back during the takeoff to balance the plane out.
And the whole plane is going, oh, you could hear, 150 nervous musicians. I'm looking out the window and I'm watching the lighted markers go by, foom, 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 but we ain't taking off. Foom. I'm going, why ain't we taking off? You could hear the tension. And the guy who was the backer, who was sitting next to me, he's beginning to get nervous. You could see it. He's taking out his life jacket. And then gradually, as the fuel burned off and the plane got lighter and faster, we took off.
No, I thought we were going to die. I took like 3 sleeping pills, and then I passed out. So I figured I'd rather be asleep and die.
From Futuro Studios, I'm Rosie Perez, and this is Our Thing, the birth of salsa in Nueva York, a podcast about the legends behind the music and the label who defined it, Fania Records. Episode 6, Fania finds its roots in Africa. By 1974, Fania co-owners Jerry Masucci and Johnny Pacheco had cornered the salsa market. They had acquired other boutique labels, opened a recording studio in New York, and a record manufacturing plant in Puerto Rico. Their empire was growing just as salsa was becoming a global sensation.
The Fania All Stars really, for the most part, sold out wherever they played.
Musician and producer Harvey Avern.
But they never broke really into the American market.
As the 1970s rolled along, salsa sat alongside arena rock and disco, which were dominating the American airwaves. But as much as Fania had hardcore fans among its community, mainstream audiences weren't embracing the genre with the same enthusiasm as acts like Elton John, Kiss, or David Bowie. Harvey Avern has a theory as to why it was so hard for American audiences to make salsa a national sound.
There's a problem with salsa. Think about this. Wherever there's a salsa band, There's always a free dance class at 8 to 9. What? So you don't do that with any kind of music. You think we got a problem here? That's just a problem. And maybe it's just too hard to dance. That was always the part. It was just too difficult to dance well.
And salsa, well, its origins in poor and Black Latino neighborhoods were written all over it. Other musical styles like disco were also Black dance genres, but disco had become so mainstream and had been so gentrified by white folks that people forgot it was a Black genre for a while. The thing with salsa is, white people couldn't take it over. It was just too hard for them to dance, too foreign sounding to them. And in the age of afros and Black power, salsa fans started to think more about the music's real roots. Here's Marisol Negron, assistant professor at UMass Boston and author of the book Made in New Rico.
By the mid-1970s, the image of salsa as a Black urban music of poor and working class Puerto Ricans becomes less fashionable. So that then by the mid-70s, we get the narrative, yes, it's music in New York, but actually it comes from Africa.
Just around this time, an opportunity came up for the Fania All Stars to make a big statement to the whole world about the music's connection to the motherland, and for the label to make a big splash. Alex Masucci.
Don King was doing the Rumble in the Jungle.
This is an awesome power of George Foreman against the violent boxing skills of Muhammad Ali. It's age against youth.
Boxing promoter Don King had created the underdog fight story of the decade, with one of history's greatest boxers staging his comeback in the continent of Africa. And they called it the Rumble in the Jungle, to be the boxing fight of all boxing fights.
I mean, Foreman was killing people, knocking everybody out. Ali was the huge underdog. You know, it was the fight of the century, you know?
Muhammad Ali had been stripped of his title because of his refusal to go to Vietnam. He famously said, quote, "I ain't got no quarrel with those Viet Cong." So, this comeback, after a 3-year boxing ban, a fine, and prison, was a moment. And though we all loved him as a boxer, Muhammad Ali was seen by many to be past his prime, and he faced fierce competition from 25-year-old George Foreman, who was a wrecking ball of a fighter. I mean, he was scary.
If Muhammad Ali want to fight me and the promoters are willing to put up $5 million, to be honest with you, I'll fight 20 Muhammad Alis any given day for $5 million.
But he says now he can stick and run and beat you.
Well, he'll definitely have to do it to beat me. Stick and run. I'm going to be running him through the jungle.
The fact is that Muhammad Ali had been out of power.
This is Felipe Luciano, co-founder of the New York chapter of the Young Lords.
They needed a worldwide event.
Don King didn't have the money to get the fight scheduled in an American venue, but he knew it would attract a huge audience. Man, I mean, this was a moment. Ali versus Foreman? Are you kidding me? When I tell you that boxing fans go hard, we go hard. Hundreds of millions of fans watch boxing worldwide. I mean, there are entire streaming services dedicated to boxing. I love boxing. I'm a fanatic. I've even been a commentator for fights. So this comeback, this fight was poised to be the biggest event of the century. People wanted in. And the boxing talent brought interest from a number of countries, ultimately landing a final offer from a country in Central Africa. Here's George Foreman telling the story to Larry King years later.
We picked the fight to go out of Africa because the government there would pay more, wouldn't take any taxes, just to highlight Mobutu Sese Seko. He wanted to highlight this great country with all the mineral wealth and show his kingdom there.
So, the fight would take place in Zaire, now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. President Mobutu Sese Seko had taken power through a military coup in the mid-60s. with the help of political leaders in Belgium and the United States.
He has stood uniformly for the peaceful settlements of disputes, but has not shrunk from his responsibilities when action was appropriate.
Let's face it, Mobutu Sese Seko was a dictator.
President Mobutu, let's just say he wasn't a good guy. He established a one-party rule in the early 70s, running elections where he was the only candidate, having musicians swear allegiance to him, enforcing that the media only acknowledge him by name, and executing his opponents in public.
People didn't want to talk about Mobutu Sese Seko because he was so crazy. He was killing people.
To put his nation on the map, he turned to sports as a way to bring international dollars and respect to his regime. This is called sports washing, and Mobutu saw the Ali Foreman fight as a public relations coup.
Mobutu said, of course, I'd like to have more profile for my country, and of course, we love Muhammad Ali, and that's how it started.
But why stop at a boxing match? Feeling the weight of this cultural moment, the producers of the boxing match decided to add a musical element. They then hired Leon Gass, yes, director of Our Latin Thing, to film everything. Believe it or not, salsa was well known in Africa. So with Leon on board, Jerry Masucci was able to convince the producers to bring the Fania All Stars on board to a multi-day music festival in Zaire's capital.
Famous record producer called me up and wanted to get in touch with Manu Dibango because they were doing the Muhammad Ali Foreman fight in Zaire. And they were putting on a music show also at the same time. And then I said, well, why don't you take the Fania off?
This is Jerry speaking to writer Mary Kent for her book, Salsa Talks.
So he said, well, come on over. So I went over there. He was at a hotel. I'll never forget, I guess you put... He was in his shorts with his feet up on a coffee table. And he said, we're going to take the Fania All Stars down. And that was it.
The concert would lead up to the boxing match and feature a who's who of American soul groups along with the Fania All Stars.
We were the first ones to be put on the bill. And then James Brown came, and Sister Sledge came.
Through a growing association with Fania Records, activist Felipe Luciano found himself invited to what was looking to be a trend-setting event.
I had a very popular radio program during that era called Latin Roots. It was English-speaking, and we played great music. And they figured that what's the use of going to this place if we're not going to be able to dispense the information, so bring him over. The Masuccis were very astute that way, and I went with them.
In sharing a global stage with some of America's premier Black entertainers, Fania aimed to show salsa as a unique American export. There just wasn't any other group like the Fania All Stars.
Really fucking exciting, you know? We're gonna go see a rumble in the jungle.
But, they had to get there first. As you remember from the beginning of the episode, after overloading the plane with nearly every piece of equipment James Brown owned, everybody on board was a sweaty, nervous mess. Leon Gass was there to record every moment. And based on his recordings during the flight, you would have had no idea that everyone thought they were going to die earlier.
They were all really crazy about the fact that we just survived the takeoff. Everybody is wildly happy.
I was sitting next to Yomotoro, Celia, Redo, and Pupi.
That's Fania All-Star Nicky Marrero.
And yet, Pupi took out his violin, and he was singing, and we're having a good time.
Johnny had his flute out. Nicky's playing the fucking chairs.
Celia Cruz sitting in the middle of the aisle on a road case, on a guitar amp road case. She's like the queen.
Celia, who's usually very composed, broke out. She was dancing in the plane.
Then Celia starts singing.
we were singing all throughout the plane, all kinds of rhythms.
And then BB came back and started playing with us. Felipe Luciano's freaking singing.
We were playing on beer cans, we were playing on bottles. We had a ball on the plane. We partied all the way to Zaire.
Hey, let me hear some more music.
As giddy as these musicians must have felt playing with each other, for many, the trip meant way more than a chance to play somewhere else.
Well, James, it seemed like we're going back home.
Yeah, after such a long time.
The majority of the Rumble in the Jungle participants, from the Boxers to the Fania All Stars, had never stepped foot on the continent of Africa. Here's Muhammad Ali. During one of his many occasions, he spoke to reporters on the days leading up to the fight.
Yeah, Africa's my home, damn America, and what America thinks. Yeah, I live in America, but Africa's the home of the black man, and I was a slave 400 years ago, and I'm going back home to fight among my brothers. Yeah.
My grandmother used to say, Africa is your mother. Puerto Rico is your father. But that's where you come from.
This is Felipe Luciano again.
I thought it was God who had given me the fortuitous opportunity to go back home. I was honored to go back home.
Fania percussionist Ray Barrero reflected on these travels during a radio interview with David Karp many years later.
This is the first time I got a chance to go to Africa and not only play our music, but get a chance to play with real African drummers. When you realize that you're in the home of the drum, it's a very humbling feeling.
In the driver's seat of this pilgrimage for the record label and its musicians sat Fania co-founder Johnny Pacheco. He knew this trip was meaningful, even beyond the music. He explained more in a 2008 interview with Latino USA's Maria Hinojosa.
It's funny, when we landed, I had Pete Conde with me. And he says to me, "What are we doing here?" And I said, "We came to see our relatives." And he could put it together. I said, "Aquí donde nació todo." Well, something happened that really moved me. So when we landed in Africa, James Brown wanted to be the first one out of the plane.
Felipe Luciano again.
James Brown had been sitting in the front of the plane with his head wrap on, had ignored us all this time. He comes out on the plank, you know, the little platform they give you?
And there must have been about 5,000 Africans. So he comes out on the plane and he goes like this, my people, my lovely people.
And his hair flops down. The humidity was so great, we fell on the floor. He had been egging us all that time. Now he comes out and talks about his people, and his whole thing fell off.
And they went past him, and they started chanting, Pacheco, Pacheco. He went bananas.
Pacheco, Johnny, Pacheco, Johnny. And we were shocked. We were really shocked.
I mean, it just shows you how there are differences in how we react to our Africanness.
Because I was in Africa about 7 or 8 times before we went to Zaire.
Out of everyone, Johnny Pacheco was like this veteran musician amongst African audiences. He'd been going since the mid-1960s, where he performed a series of concerts in Senegal.
They did an album, Pacheco in Africa.
African songs, African lyrics.
Jerry went to Africa with Johnny on the first trip.
They love him because he was sending stuff over there. They were exporting stuff. Fania was exporting stuff to Africa for years, decades before we even got there. So they knew it. Also, remember, the musicians from Cuba had gone to Africa in the 30s, and they knew our music. They knew it.
They love the music there. Guajiras, Son Montuno.
Johnny was aware of how Fania would be received during their visit to Zaire. For West Africans and Congolese in particular, they've been vibing with Latin music for a very long time.
I am very much obsessed with the fact that crates of Cuban records will arrive on the west coast of Africa.
As journalist Ernesto Lechner explains, Latin records would arrive in these African countries from merchants and Marines arriving from the Caribbean.
West African musicians would listen to the Cuban songs and would recognize the faint echoes of their own music in them. And then they would start singing those Latino songs phonetically.
In an interview with Aurora Flores, Johnny Pacheco remembers first encountering this enthusiasm for mambo, rumba, and pachanga during an early visit to the continent.
There's a couple of singers that I ran into. One sings like Benny Moré, and the other one sings like Tito Rodriguez. I remember he did, cara de payaso, cosa de payaso. Exactly like Tito. And I went over to him and said, oye, me chévere. He couldn't speak a word of English, all Spanish. But he was a great singer.
For Felipe Luciano, the link between Latin and African music tradition is a fact that we can't ignore.
I don't see how we can separate ourselves from the continent. I have always preached about the umbilical connection between Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and Africa. Our rhythm is directly African. We cannot continue to act as if this is just Latin music. This is African music.
And there seemed to be this mutual appreciation between Fania musicians and their fans in Zaire.
So I noticed a newfound swag. They had swag. They walked through the streets, they were honored. Here in New York, they were just musicians. Hey, ¿cómo está? Oye, Barreto, Eddie, whatever it was. Imagine going into a holy place and being so impressed with the respect that other people give that you tend to respect it yourself. You tend to sit down and feel the vibe. And that's what was happening. I saw not cultural superiority, but cultural respect. I was amazed.
But let's be real. Before any cultural shifting moment could occur on stage in 1974, the musicians had to party like it was 1974.
We went to these hotels, and every night, filet mignon, caviar, champagne, pheasants. I mean, it was like unbelievable. And then I said to Yuma Tequila, I said, I got 36 musicians here, and I don't have one joint.
In fact, one day we asked the guy to get us some pot.
Next day, a guy with his buddy comes over with 2 shopping bags full of smoke. You know those shopping bags that with the paper full of smoke. I said, who the hell's gonna smoke all of that?
I said, I'm not taking it back to the United States.
Then we sent the guy out to get the coke, and he came back with synthetic cocaine. So we were high from then on. Then all of a sudden, everything went bad for some reason. Then all of a sudden, everything went bad for some reason.
And the bad that Alex Masucci is referring to were the, shall we call them, whims that come from dealing with a dictator.
It must be remembered that the regime under Mobutu Sese Seko was a dictatorial regime, and it was corrupt.
Well, Mobutu wanted us to pay the hotel bill, which was like $1 million, because it was double, he doubled the value of their money, and these guys were drinking Dom Perignon and eating filet mignon.
So we had run-ins with soldiers. I had a run-in with a soldier. They kept on these putting rifles, bayonets on the rifles. I remember telling one guy, you got to take that out of my fucking face, because I'll make you eat it.
It wasn't just run-ins with the regime or bills to pay. If Mobutu wanted something, it was his. No questions asked. Engineer Bernie Fox had tons of equipment on the trip.
Mobutu's people figure out that they have no communication like I brought with me. There was no communication between the stadium, the hotel, the other hotel. No communication. Fortunately, I had brought along all of this CB equipment. My $17,000 worth of CB equipment. He kept the equipment after the show.
On top of that, it was rumored that Mobutu had recently rounded up many of the city's criminals, murdered and buried them under the stadium, which was, hey, not the most comforting omen for the Fania team, you know what I mean?
Mobutu, he took like 50 of the worst criminals and shot them before we got there to make an example that don't fuck around when these people are here.
But backstage and in rehearsals for the concert, you wouldn't have known there were any issues. Leon's camera caught the flavor that was the Fania All Stars. And when the 3-day concert finally started, it was really quiet.
The place was empty.
And that's because, in a twist of fate, George Foreman suffered a cut above his eyes while sparring that postponed the fight for 5 weeks. But the musical show had to go on.
They opened it up to all the Africans to come in for free. And then they started putting all the African acts on.
Mobutu sent the army to take people off the streets and basically push them into the stadium. And that's how the show got populated.
When the Fania All Stars finally went on stage, well, their energy can only be described with one word. Filmmaker and Congolese music scholar Alan Brain explains.
The Congolese have a word, it's called sevene. The sevene is that moment where the orchestra really explodes musically and everybody gets to dance. I believe that's the moment where the Congolese saw this kind of epic version of salsa that they hadn't necessarily seen before or been exposed to in a massive way. And it had effects on them.
I saw awe in their eyes. I saw respect in their eyes. Somehow they realized that they were the repository of the last forms of African music in a new way.
Yo, there are too many epic moments to pick from this concert. You got Nicky Morello and Ray Barretto hypnotic percussion solos. There was Cheo Feliciano and Jorge Santana making the walls of the stadium drip with their duet, El Raton. There's Hector Lavoe's solo performance of Mi Gente, filled with so much fellowship with the audience, you would think he was singing for his cousins. Especially right before Hector sing along with the audience when he asked Johnny about his abuela sitting in the stands. A nod to the African roots in Johnny Pacheco's Dominican lineage.
Everybody chandela, todo el mundo, el coro, everybody in Africa, todo el mundo.
To see the members move in different supporting parts of the band, the Fania All Stars showed an incredible unity. To many, this was unique, kind of like a supportive family dynamic.
It's insane because in the backup, in the choros, you have people like Santitos Colon, I think, and Cheo Feliciano's doing choros. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? It's like Bob Dylan's doing backup for somebody else.
While the concert was filled with its magical moments and performers, the Congolese audience really showed love when Celia Cruz showed up.
Madame Celia Cruz.
Fania play 2 versions of Guantanamera in Kinshasa. One version where everybody's singing, Héctor Lavoe, Ismael Miranda, everybody's singing. And then there is the other one in the traditional way, you know, that Celia plays it. Everybody remember, they call it Mama Celia Cruz.
Celia entered the stage like a constellation, a beaming smile, shiny dress with sleeves that flared like rays of sun, and a voice that was unmistakable.
Yeah.
When she came on stage, man, the place went crazy. It was electric.
Celia was amazing.
Her voice just resonated through the whole stadium.
Not only did Celia enter the stage as the only woman on the Fania All Star team, the concert offered a redemption of sorts for the singer. After exile from her country of Cuba, Celia received something that felt like a homecoming, a reception from the Congolese crowd that said, "We see you, we love you, you're one of us." The videographer Leon Guest's footage captures audience members' gaze of awe and adoration during Celia's performance.
I felt the reverence that they had for this woman. I felt the adulation. I felt the respect. I felt the worship. Celia Cruz!
Behind Celia stood a member of the Fania All Stars who stole the hearts of many on the continent, including this euphoric Congolese audience, the one and only Johnny Pacheco. Johnny shuffled and conducted the musicians throughout the concert, moving through variations of excited little brother energy to that of grand paternal maestro. He was amazing. He also just looks like the coolest dude alive. Seriously, the man was fully in control, joyful, connected, and so happy to look out onto the audience of adopted family members and asking them to join along. Not to mention this specific moment where Johnny cannot ignore the feeling in his body. He has to dance. And dance he does. Johnny shimmers his shoulders and moves towards Celia, and all of a sudden they're dancing in front of each other. Arms and their whole body moving with the drums. Johnny hits the floor at one point and yet still manages to keep the orchestra in time and the horns in when they're supposed to. Was the power of the drum. It was so dope. Johnny Pacheco's performance changed the course of Congolese music for the remainder of the century. And that's not hyperbole. You just gotta look at one of the country's musical icons, Papa Wemba. This is filmmaker Alan Brain.
Papa Wemba, which belongs to that next iteration of Congolese rumba, says that he was there at that concert when the Fania played, and that he heard Johnny Pacheco many times saying, "Viva la música!" Like, hooray for the music, "Viva la música!" Que viva la música! He says that that's why he named his own band, later a famous band, Viva la Música, as an homage to Johnny Pacheco that day, to the energy of Pacheco, which I'm pretty sure left all the Congolese like, what is this?
But there was something else unmistakable about Johnny's energy, something that was folkloric in the truest sense of the word. Johnny was of the people, not just the music, but in his character as well. Felipe Luciano saw the way Johnny treated people around him, even the band members of other musicians.
One of the things that really bothered us is that James Brown's girls, the dancers, were not being paid well. So they didn't have any money to spend. So we gave the money so they can go to the marketplace and pick up a few trinkets. But I was surprised at his strictness with the band and his intransigent attitude toward them. That's when I began to realize that sometimes fame and power can make you put your ass on your shoulders to the point where you forget what the little guy is. Johnny Pacheco was never like that. Johnny Pacheco would talk to all of the bus boys, all of the band boys. He was an affable soul. He was wonderful.
Maybe beyond the musical talent, this spirit is why so many people enthusiastically greeted Johnny Pacheco on the runway when he returned to Africa. You can feel it even in the clips of his interactions with Congolese audience members following the concert. They gave him high fives, shook his hand, laughed with him.
Au revoir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cinque. Zaire. From the Bronx, New York.
The concert wasn't set up to be a competition between the various artists who took the stage during these 3 nights. But if there was one victor, one group that deeply connected with the Congolese people and potentially a new global audience, that group was the Fania All Stars, with folks like Hector Lavoe, Celia Cruz, and Johnny Pacheco as the reigning leaders of salsa. Oh yeah, and about the real competition that this was all centered around, that big boxing match, turns out everyone had it wrong, okay? Muhammad Ali still proved that he was the GOAT. And in round 8, Ali knocked George Foreman down and won the fight.
I told you today, I'm still the greatest of all time. Never again defeat me. Never again say that I'm going to be defeated. Never again make me the underdog until I'm about 50 years old.
Due to ownership issues, the concert footage took decades to make its way to audiences, eventually adding up to 2 documentaries. The 1996 Oscar-winning When We Were Kings, directed by Leon Gast, and a later film about the concert called Soul Power. Fania also eventually put out a record of the concert. Added up, the films and the album illustrate something almost ethereal, a mythical moment in the Fania canon. You know, for kids like me, this moment was monumental too. Our parents and grandparents wanted to assimilate so badly because, let's be honest, they were treated very badly. And I get it. But it was almost like Fania said, come on, let's not forget where we come from. When that overloaded plane landed on that tarmac in Zaire, it reinforced where our cultural pride should also land. Ernesto Lechner again.
I think there is definitely something very moving about the film and the recordings of Fania All Stars in Africa. And I feel it instinctively when I listen to the records, but I've always also seen it in person, and that is a feeling of community, a feeling of a family. There was really a feeling of generosity, of acceptance, of sharing. So the crowd, and they're going wild over this music that is so deeply connected to their own roots. That is a moment that makes me hopeful about the human race. And we do need more of that.
For activist Felipe Luciano, this trip to Zaire was one of the most profound experiences of his life.
It's as if they had come home, because many, many people died in the Middle Passage. You're taken from your land, and you go to another country. You become English speaking, you become wise, and sometimes not wise. And you go back to the place that you were taken from. We were their progeny. We were the ones that had left and survived. And the people are crying. I'm gonna get emotional about this. They're crying and they're saying, welcome home. Welcome home, papi. They did not say we were different. They did not say we were Puerto Rican or Dominican or Cuban. It's like I've never seen anything like that before. It was spiritual, it was cultural, it was political. That's it. This was it. This was it.
Remember how one Fania All Star decided to get off the plane to Zaire at the last minute?
Willie Colon slipped out. He didn't go to Africa. And what happened is for the next 10, 14 days, he was in the studio all by himself without Johnny Pacheco looking over his shoulder. And he became his own man, his own producer.
in our next episode.
I'm very technically minded. Consider myself more than anything else a recording artist, more than a musician or a singer or whatever.
Willie Colon and Ruben Blades create a musical partnership that will change the face of salsa forever.
I just thought that they were the best two. They were both young. They were good looking. Willie was a great producer, and he was a great songwriter and a great singer.
Meanwhile, Fania's business practices start to create real tears in the label.
We got robbed. We didn't get paid. Really, for our royalties.
I said, Jerry, this is going to cause you problems.
That's next time on Our Thing, the birth of salsa in Nueva York. Can't wait for the next episode? Join Futuro Plus for early access to the whole season, ad-free listening, and exclusive bonus content for Our Thing, the birth of salsa in Nueva York. Go to futuromediagroup.org/join plus to get access today. Our Thing, the birth of salsa in Nueva York, is an original podcast from Futuro Studios. It was made possible by the Mellon Foundation. Our senior producer is Jeannie Montalvo. Our episodes were written, reported, and produced by her and Mark Pagan. The episodes were edited by Maria Garcia. Additional editing by Marlon Bishop. Our post-producer is Joaquin Cutler. He and Jeannie Montalvo sound designed our episodes. Our associate producer is Liliana Ruiz. Our production managers are Francis Poon, Jessica Ellis, and Victoria Estrada. Mixing by Stephanie LeBeau, Julia Caruso, and JJ Corubin. Fact-checking by Tatiana Diaz, and additional booking by Javier Reyes. Editorial consultation by Ernesto Lechner. Special thanks to Aurora Flores, Martin Cohen, Alex Masucci, Marisol Negron, Mary Kent, and Ernesto Lucar. Special thanks to Craft Recordings, a Concord company. Theme song and original music by Ella Brick. Additional music courtesy of David Frankel and Avenida Bay. Additional music for this episode also courtesy of Songs of Media Creature. Yours truly recorded at Bridge Studios in Brooklyn by Urosh Jovanovic and at Full English Post by Charles Atangana and Ben Steiner. Special thanks to my manager, Tar Canafani of Strand Entertainment, and my glam squad, hair, Johnny Lavoie, and makeup, Karen Dupiche. Executive produced for Futuro Studios by Marlon Bishop and Maria Garcia. From Concord Records, executive producers are Bruce McIntosh and Wesley Adams. Show art by Jose Ostolaza. Original show concept by Marlon Bishop and Jeannie Montalvo. Legal review by Neil Rossini, Michael Martin Lindhorst, and Jonathan Fisher of Legal Arts. Our marketing team includes Anelo Reyes and Luis Luna. Futuro Media was founded by Maria Hinojosa. I'm your host and resident Nuyorican, Rosie Perez. You can hear all the music featured in this episode and this season on our Spotify music playlist. We've got links in our show notes. And don't forget to tap the heart to save it to your library because we'll be adding to it each week. And make sure you follow Our Thing, the birth of salsa in Nueva York on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.